Welcome everyone. Stream is healthy and we should be live. Welcome everyone to another fun little weekend tinkering episode here straight from the Xcode headquarters. Of course, here is our lovely and famous Octane stuff, and what I want to do today is only partially, well, mostly sort of anyway related to the Sgi Octane, but it's always nice to have it on the desk and have fun with it. When I synced and imported with the Gentoo patches the last time for the Sgi Octane from MIP64, I noticed they had here restored firmware, so this is also relevant for each and every one of you, in also firmware for Intel and Mega RAID and whatever, Wi-Fi booting and NFS and cluster distributed file system and encryption fun. So architecture MIP64, and I realized that they restored firmware. So apparently in upstream Linux, it was in Linux in good old times normal to have the firmware directly included in the drivers. So for example, in this case, the QLogic SCSI driver, and this is here the extracted shamelessly copied from Gentoo 1430 or restore SGI firmware. This is not as much as SGI firmware, but actually generic QLogic, so all of the vintage SCSI, well, not all, but most of many of those. And so this patch, also not log but diff, so I deleted this here locally, so this was not needed for 4.12 what we was running before, but I guess from this patch anyway, I've not yet checked this yet, but doesn't really matter anyway. So somewhere between 4.12 and 4.18 they have deleted even more firmware, because nowadays it's more state of the art and more preferred to load this from user space, to have this firmware not built into the kernel image, but have this laying in lib firmware, at least on Linux, lib firmware kernel, lib firmware, whatever, like AMD GPU, Intel, wireless, and so on. And so this is just a special case of this vintage retro SCSI firmware. And yeah, the firmware is of course some binary blob stuff of good old-fashioned stuff here. And so the Gentoo people have just restored this, because, so what is the issue? The issue is we are booting the Sgi Octane here, and like any other Ultra 30 or whatever, also Speed Racer was the password test, hopefully also typing faster than the login program span. So certainly if we don't have the firmware, we can't boot from, at least, well, we could network boot, but anyway. So seeing this, I realized, wait a second, so there you see how annoying this firmware stuff is, because actually I like never, well, okay, initially in good old times it was always included inside the Linux kernel binary or its modules. There you see also making stuff more modular, more sorting it into normal files, and then causing all kinds of boot issues. So when I saw this, I realized, wait a second, we do not even have infrastructure. So if we would not restore this even in T2, like the Gentoo folks have done here, we could not even boot this, because we didn't even have infrastructure to copy when creating the initrd. For this to work without the firmware inside the kernel or modules, we would need initrd script infrastructure to include the firmware inside the initrd. So this is what I've done already. I prepared this already, because otherwise it most likely would have been too boring. So this is not only Sgi MIP64 Octane goodness, but theoretically all other kind of expensive, funny server gear like Mega RAID, whatever, LSI, you name it. While we are live on YouTube, and so yeah, so I included, so what have I done here before the live stream, so that it's not as boring. I expanded our MK initrd stuff, also only live here with a warning wrongly indented. So I call here mod info field, no, not depends, mod info field firmware. So this mod info returns then the firmware. So this is specially encoded so that mod info, like module or kmod tools, can read the stuff. So If this is firmware, I added a new switch here, also command line switch. By default, I decided by default we probably want the firmware. When we build T2 images for all the architectures, that by default you can boot everything, although of course again this increases again the size of the initrd. I'm getting a little bit out of hand honestly though. And you can disable this with minus firmware, then you don't get this. I also, so if there is firmware, then I have here a loop copying this, so firmware, if there is something in firmware, then one needs firmware, and then for all files in this, copy this over into the initrd, and if no firmware is requested, then I don't even include this, so if not firmware, then warning needs firmware and skip this, because certainly it makes no sense to include all the fancy large modules there in the initrd if they wouldn't work anyway, because the firmware is missing. Let's maybe quickly check here, change this one indentation warning. I think this was this one. Yeah, this is tabs versus we would have seen this most likely. I've not yet tested this. The live stream could still go massively wrong as usual. So I've only tested this here on the Mac Mini, from which I'm streaming on 0 drop frames, amazing stuff. Also 30 frames. Yeah, difference today in contrast to last day's stream. Today I'm booting with I/O MMU off and mitigations off because performance on an aging Core i7. So MK initrd, I've only tested this here without booting with, as you see here, of all the stuff. So MK initrd like that. And what is new, I also need to slightly polish this warning and stuff another day. So what is new, I control see this here, adding firmware. So this is new previously, and there you see how much firmware is it, because we are including network. Maybe I actually probably maybe don't include network by default or something, because again the size is really getting out of hand, and as you see there's quite some firmware going in there, especially with all the networking modules and whatnot. Probably I need to filter this in the future sometime soon, not to include all those random kind of garbage in there. And also the new option -- or -- firmware, not to do this, not yet sure. The problem is I normally don't need this by default, and then it's of course warning here needs firmware skipped, and not so personally I would normally not need this, so I was actually also thinking, should I make this the default or not? But the problem is, if I don't make this the default, you know how it is, you don't make it the default today and then you're missing it tomorrow, like on your precious Octane. So for the time being, I thought, okay, let's start with making this the default, although yes, it totally blows up the initrd size, but that's what we are here for. Also, for my own microkernel, I said this already, long term, maybe probably likely working on an own microkernel, because future. And in this I said this, I would probably make the microkernel hardware abstraction layer the bootloader, and then only load the needed stuff and not make this. There you see the limits of this old-fashioned like monolithic kernel with monolithic modules and bootloader so separated from the kernel and firmware here, and yeah, but anyway, let's try to test this. So for this we probably could commit this first, and where this could go wrong is commit this. So this nice markings here is our tab versus space warning stuff, so that looks on a first glance pretty okay-ish. Edit firmware, edit support, go to MK initrd to also include needed firmware. Only here, yeah, working live on your Linux distribution, here only live on YouTube. So this could go wrong in plenty of ways, because so not only is it not tested, this could also still totally blow up and not work. The other thing is the arc load. We are using arc load here on the Octane, and arc load is some fancy special MIPS 60 or MIPS SGI MIPS loader that, yeah, and I've just recently pulled in patches, so until like recently it doesn't even support initrd. and only working on the origin or something the other months, you probably also want to have this slightly larger. Huh? Let's make this slightly larger. Also then you don't see the octane, but probably whatever. So I need to update arc loads on the octane, which I've not done in a year or two. So each time I do stuff like this, usually something goes wrong. And also remembering what to... Yeah, so not really sure, should we... Maybe we could try to compile this, or should we maybe rather do this on the data center? Let's see. Data center is here. So also we want SVN up architecture package base MK initrd or initrd. And the reason we have our own initrd back in the day, when I actually initially a decade ago or 15 years ago, I tried to avoid initrd as long as possible, because I always found this cumbersome and annoying to deal with. And then eventually the kernel became too large and everything, eventually I did this. So then I took a look, and like all the distributions, Red Hat, SUSE, they all have their own initrd stuff. And let's rebuild the kernel. I've just rebuilt the kernel, so I pre-tested deleting this restore SGI firmware patch. I tested this already, but we need to rebuild the kernel anyway, because now we have the initrd enablement stuff here to 42 for the cross-compile stuff. This will not take long, 7 minutes or so. Actually, in the same time we can run this in the background and also cross-compile arc load. And so initially I delayed this initrd stuff super long, until it was like 10 years ago totally not viable anymore. And of course nowadays everything you see bloat on the Linux kernel and all the firmware and bits and pieces, it would also not be practical to have a 50 megabyte, well, the Linux kernel is already getting out of hand, and then if you would not have all modular like in T2, our default config usually is like as many as most modules as possible. And without this, the Linux kernel would easily get 50 megabyte with everything built in. Certainly makes no sense. Also wasting lots of space, even on your data center, cloud, virtual machine stuff, because you would have all the modules, drivers built in that you would nearly never need. You see your arc load, also stuff totally unmaintained. Even here I extracted this from Debian. Not nice. 2019, not nice. Upstream releases of whatsoever. Everything you need to clobber together and peel out of, steal out of others' distribution packages hidden somewhere in source tarballs. Also this, probably I edited this because usually the Debian patches are a little bit, always touching a little bit other stuff left and right. So often I need to, because they touch man pages and control files, and so usually take some extra hour or two to... so not really sure if I've ever tested this. Again, why? Because arcload 15 years ago, the original author didn't have initrd support, so I've no idea if I even tested this, nor if this works, or YOLO. So a lot of stuff can go wrong. What do I show here? Probably I shortly would need to, so we can try to flash the, not flash, but well, sort of flash in, because arcload, the bootloader, lives in the volume header special partition format on SGI arcs, and not even, so there's a volume header tool for just that. Build MIPS while the kernel is still building, and we should somewhere have arcload. It is var adm flist arcload, and I hope you appreciate that I have done 1 hour already since 1 hour in the office. And okay, so we have boot arcload. Apparently that is maybe directly the elf or so, something of that sort, elf image to copy into the volume header. When you do this, not doing MIPS each day, and then if you do it once a year, then you need to remember all these fancy details and not mix it with Intanium, Spark and whatnot. So Linux kernel also finished already. That means we have these two things ready. Maybe we tar this up. 1 second, let me just What do we have here? Not this, 1 second, I don't want to expose you some tar. So tar Linux, so we can show you that. And so let's custom pack this together. That would be the kernel, which is here the special, not the latest, but the latest MIPS patches as we have synced them with Gen 2. Also the reason I actually do this is because eventually I want to work with the upstream MIPS maintainer to get this upstream sometime soon, between soon and forever. So arcload, let's pack this all together in this tarball here for SCPing the two. Just don't want to show that. So SCP, that is to the gateway in the data center. I also need to work on some clustered file system to better copy this stuff around. So yeah, and then we have copied this. Then we can switch to the Octane and copy this over here, which shortly, 1 second. SCP, this Linux tarball, DH client. Did I not plug in Ethernet or not run DH client yet? Also, while we wait for this to get an IP address, kernel allows init RAMFS to be embedded nowadays. Yeah, but the problem is that doesn't really solve the issue, because then the Linux kernel is still super large, and it's in my opinion only for emergency or embedded use. Not showing that password or but yeah, it allows embedding this, but then the build procedure is not so nice if always custom. It's of course more convenient to have this regularly laying next to each other. Well, as regular files, it's always nicer to work with files. So then let's untar this. Which kernel did we even boot? Uname A. So we have 518. So tar xf. So this, only copying this in one go, of course not the super nicest thing to have this boot arcload here inside of there. Which by the way somehow could also, where do we have, this is, where do we have, oh, what is both controls aperture, what nonsense is this? I probably have to reconfigure that another day. Anyway, so this, with this we will, so now we have an initrd, right? Do we? Yeah, we have an initrd that I never used on an Octane. So that means we not only need to edit the arcload, which probably the arccf. So the good thing is we always have here a backup kernel, which is actually slightly mislabeled in terms of, that's labeled new, but whatever. Just a little bit like that. And so what would be the syntax for initrd? Probably initrd, right? Image system. And yeah, the issue with initrd, probably we need to take a look into the patch here. That would be package arc. Is this even the latest version? This is the latest version, initrd. Let's read our fine steeled patch. So this has initrd and sys initrd, whatever the difference is, I have no idea. The Debian people invented this amazing stuff. So this token is initrd, and yeah, 2019 reading your freaking manual in the source code. So segment address something, load file, offset, and yeah, beside I need to also, so we can't stream forever because family expects me to cook today. Well, actually not today, like often. So load initrd, and load initrd, where would be the, come on, attempted to bytes from, Yeah, if we do not get this working quickly, then we continue later today on the More Life channel. Just if you were wondering how much work everything is, and so initrd, let's put your system, I don't know what is the difference and what is required or not. And boot VM, can you probably not read this because yeah. Probably you wanna read this more, huh? I have the feeling. Initrd, so initrd for 18.5 dist image or something of that sort, and semicolon because nah, that will otherwise. So yeah, we can not only ruin this boot up with syntax error initrd system. So volume header, that would be var admf list. What was in volume header tools? Hello? No volume header tools. I will also probably try to switch soon to the new system root with N32 for probably likely higher performance. Let's find volume header tool something. Nothing better than the sound of a 7200 or 10,000. Maybe this is 7200 so. Package, what would that be? Package MIPS. No, where is our volume header tool? Or maybe file system. Come on. Can't make this up. Arcboot, arcloads. Let's SVN up just in case of. What was the volume header tool and where was it in? So it was something like vol HDR volume header, but no. Arcs Sgi volume header, disk volume header. Yeah, and DVH, of course it's DVH tool. Darn it, how could I forget this? Volume header. What? I don't have it here. VHL, typical something, IRIX, Linux, DVH tool. DVH tool. DVH. There it is. It's really not installed. Yeah, the speed of, you saw not on the Ultra Spark the other day, speed of SVN up on such a workstation. I slightly wonder why I don't have this tool on here. Maybe I've only installed the bootloader a year ago before I maybe started using the new system root, I guess. Missing only, so this will take shortly, unfortunately. Probably want to build in tempfs, because why not? So Duvi has parallel max, should be 2. Of course, only 2 MIPS processors here. So yeah, unfortunately this will take us, probably wanted to change to, what's this rewriting right now. Anyway, yeah, so volume header. Yeah, that comes from reinstalling there. You see, why do I usually not reinstall so often? Because then you have your new system, and I found 1,400 packages since last running the config. How much can an unsuccessful Woman distribution do in a year or two? Actually, it's not 2 years, it's only 1 year. So, how many people are still? Hey, 14 people, that is amazing. A little bit of a pity that we now need to rebuild or compile DVH tool. That is slightly annoying. Yeah, why you don't want to overspend for vintage hardware on eBay, because dual 250 megahertz R10000 R10K performance SCSI rotating magnetic storage. Just rewriting the config because you can do it. Anyway, do we have anything else? So we have copied this over, we edited the initrd config there in arc.cf. Yeah, how much time does it take to perfect this? Let's enable verbose if we don't have this, and we don't have this. Maybe this was still in time. We could actually, while we wait for that, which by the way, not Apple crap displays, right? This amazing NEC display here, not a paid advertisement, has picture in picture here, which is actually not too bad for having your build, monitoring your builds there for more amazing setup in 2019 here, picture in picture. So then you can see here without, well, we could also secure shell by the way, how many 30 frames, looks a little bit again, anyway. So we could also actually do some other update builds here while we wait for that in the data center. That is some proper use of multitasking. Otherwise, ask me anything while we are at it. I hope you enjoy this kind of vintage streams or not. Actually, as I said, not only usable for the Sgi Octane, but any other data center stuff. Of course, we are cheapskates, we don't have this fancy data center stuff that needs firmware to boot, but maybe you have, and then T2 is already prepared for all the other fancy AMD 64, more fancy modern Spark 64, upcoming ARM AArch 64 or RISC-V. Yep, now we only thing missing here, Ryzen for not only faster build speed but also faster reference build stuff there. This includes also the morning updates, which are also wrong keyboard because too many keyboards. So do we have here? So yeah, this is here. I hope you enjoy this inspiration for how to work efficiently here with picture-in-picture, multitasking, data center, SSH. Of course, normally I would secure shell but yeah, I need to, well, we could actually have a serial cable here, but of course it's slightly more fun to boot the Sgi Octane with actual graphic output. So what else do we have here? Some of this stuff not really changes, although we could probably even changed here in LLVM. Yeah, actually I need recurring shoutout. Some stuff is not so cool, so here's a checksum actually changed. Darn it, so much shit stuff to do. So I'm not really sure what happens there. If the LLVM people release LLVM with some typo fix in something, that is certainly super annoying. Hey, and we also dual 250 megahertz. Let's disable the picture-in-picture stuff again. So, volume header tool. So DVH tool something. So that would be DVH tool print all. So we have here unknown partition something. So we have here boot file Unix. I called this Unix probably because I didn't want, in IRIX it's probably called Unix. So how did this work? Actually, you know what? Maybe we could, to save the old bootloader, maybe we can have two files in there. So let's see. So volume header remove and, oh, wait a second, they have volume header to Unix, Unix to volume header file name. So yeah, also esoteric, exotic boot stuff for 100 here live on this channel, and all the stuff you always forget after a year how to use this bloody freaking crappy tool. So probably Unix to volume header. That probably means file means boot arc load, I hope, and then maybe we call this arc load, and that was maybe not mistyped. So let's print this. So now we have here two directory entries additionally in this volume header. Fancy stuff. Actually, wait a second, why is this now such? Did it not say Unix? So it says Unix, boot file Unix. Wait a second, what is this here? Boot info, boot file. No, wait a second. Okay, is this? I had this. Sorry, I mixed this. But okay, anyway, so Sash. So this is the name of the whatever IRIX boot there, and I named it so that I don't need to change too much in the environment variables for changing between booting IRIX and Unix. So now we have this as a backup, as a fallback, so bytes. So this is a similar size, just slightly larger now, this one. So then let's probably initrd, new kernel, probably Control Alt Delete and hope for the best. Probably. Usually when we do this live on YouTube, then something goes wrong, so keep your fingers crossed. Maybe somebody puts it for an LLVM here. This is also why I don't commit this here. Usually I need to check now on which other machine I actually did the LLVM update, which of course I don't really remember on which file, on which of these machines. Maybe on the Ryzen, wherever I did the probably C-Lang Musel stuff. But also in my opinion this should never be done. So this is really amateurish from the LLVM people. To do actually, you should really never ever respin a turbo, always call this version 2 or whatever, fixed, you name it. So what do we even show here? But what do I know here about professionalism on my unsuccessful woman distribution? So that is enter command monitor, print. Fun fact for this video today, I sacrificed the VGA cable. I was actually considering, the problem is if I capture this, I actually booted the stupid Linux with a bloody binary only capture driver here, but I don't have a VGA Y cable for hooking into there. I was considering soldering a VGA path through Y splitter cable, but I even cut it this, so I sacrificed one VGA cable. The VGA cable, it looked thin and cheap, but it was fancy shielded. So not only was it double shielded, but it even had the RGB and zinc lines also shielded. So much to fancy VGA cables from 2 decades ago. So didn't really feel like soldering that today. Probably another day soldering VGA cable. So we have here somewhere load file name that is right now, yeah, OS loader Sgi, which probably you may or may not be able to see there, with some nice moire patterns, only here live on this channel. And so that is setnv OS loader arc load, and let's boot and hope for the best. So this is still whatever, let's boot. So this file not found, thank you very much. What is this now? Loader. Grub file system error, file not found. arcf failed using default configuration. VM Linux failed. Okay, so much to that amazing experience. That is why I was exceptionally so clever to have a backup. So OS load Sgi boot. File not found. What the heck? Okay, maybe this IP30. So either we now have a parsing error. So then let's set env OS load file name new and hope that boots. File not found. Darn it! That is now extremely inconvenient. Actually. So much to having a backup. That probably means it doesn't like to pass our arcf anymore. So the way to fix this, but I need to go home and cook lunch now for the family, otherwise they get angry with me. So either I take this out, I have SCSI connector dongles that you have seen me in previous videos. So either we take out the hard drive mount. This is the beauty of Linux, that can mount each and every partition type, and because this is not regular DOS or whatever Windows or EFI partition stuff, this is as you've seen SGI, IRIX partition volume header stuff. So SGI style partition table that your distribution may or may not even have compiled in int2. Our amazing Linux has this option built in for mounting SGI partitions. So most likely either taking the hard drive out and mounting this with a USB dongle, USB SCSI cable, plugging it back in and out again, or, which maybe I actually will do, change my TFTP server, which anyway I want a more, I said this before, I want a collection of bootable images there on their servers, and most likely I will network boot, but first I need to cook some dinner, some lunch. So I hope you enjoyed this so far. Of course, usual doesn't work so much too. Why does everything take so much time? Why do I not have a bootable ISO image? Because there's always something like initrd, like generating a bootable ISO, and usually when you test something, then something goes wrong. Also, I plug out the power, because without load in idle, the power supply makes some frizzle noise. Anyway, I hope you learned a lot, including that initrd you need then potentially firmware in there and all the bits and pieces. Why is it so with initrd, with supporting loadable kernels to mount your root file system, and potentially needing firmware not only for the vintage SCSI QLogic stuff, but also potentially modern server stuff. How is the P3 project going? It's going well when I do something on it, but honestly for me it's too boring to deal with the crashing RSX. So certainly I only work on it when I'm feeling like it, and as long as the RSX is crashing annoyingly on me, then. But we will continue with this another day also. Winter is coming, and anyway I also want, there you see how much stuff you, well, if you want to support this. Also, like a shout out, showing you, well, how much real work, like actually getting stuff tested and doing, and usually something like going wrong, whatever is wrong now with it. In contrast to other maybe YouTubers who only make one video, like one P3 or like Commodore, like one vintage video a week and then never using the machines. That is the difference between making one pretty video and never touching it again, because for one pretty video you could use a decade-old Linux and don't care about having the latest greatest stuff actually working and being able to actually use it as a workstation so much for all this fancy stuff. Leave me in the comments below what you want to see more. P3, Octane, Spark, PowerPC, you name it. I need to cook some lunch and then I'm back for more amazing video stuff and work and testing. Maybe potentially on the more live channel, because I'm not doing too many of these videos here on the main channel. So if you want to see this, then more channel there, recommended channel tabs there somewhere. And as usual, leave me in the comments below what you think, if what you have learned, what you want to see, P3 or Octane. And yeah, also P3 you can do this at home, right? You don't need to wait for me to do this testing. You can work on the RSX. Also, fun fact, I will most likely, I looked in some emulator, the RCP3 something emulator stuff, and they have some defines and inner working stuff of the RSX, like emulating when games write to the RSX. So maybe I try to recycle some bits and pieces there from the P3 emulator. But don't forget to share, like and subscribe. And yeah, again, right now still building here on this channel. I would like to do P3 stuff each and every day, but with $3 AdSense revenue certainly can't. I wish I could, but that is what we are building the channel here with, all the mixed content, that you learn something and have some entertainment, and hopefully eventually can work full-time on making all this open source stuff totally amazing and greater again.